We'll get started here this morning. Thank you for being with us here this morning. This is the fifth in our series of informational webinars. This one is creating a powerful board. And it's how we'll talk about how to build a board that's driven, dynamic, and accountable. So welcome, and we'll get started. And before we do get started, I just want to let you know who you'll be hearing from this morning. This webinar is hosted by Capital CFO, and you'll be hearing from Sabrina Hauser, who is the owner of Capital CFO, and me, Liz Chipman. I'm there in the middle. I'm a consultant here with Capital CFO, and I'll be sharing a little bit of the tools and the templates that will be takeaways for you today. And then Katie Stair is also here. She's another consultant with Capital CFO, and she'll be working behind the scenes to help us with any technical difficulties and also helping us to answer your questions. Before we get started, here's some housekeeping for you. If you're calling in by phone and do not have access to the video portion, you can email your questions to us, and we will respond to you in a timely manner after the webinar is over. So if you do have any questions, if you're calling in by phone, please email them to liz@capitalcfollc.com. That's liz@capitalcfollc.com. If you have any technical difficulties at any time during this webinar, you can reach out to us using the chat box, and we'll be monitoring that chat box, and we'll try to help you out that way. And I also wanted to let you know that we will be pausing for questions at some points during the webinar, but if you have any questions or comments at any time, please enter them in the chat box, and we will be monitoring that and try to address all your questions. If there's anything we don't get to during this webinar, we'll follow up with you directly after the webinar. Also wanted to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and that we're going to provide the recording of the webinar to you and to all folks who have registered after the webinar, along with all the tools and templates that we'll be sharing during the webinar. So with no further ado, I'll introduce Sabrina, who's going to tell you a little bit about Capital CFO.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much, Liz. I am Sabrina Hauser, the owner of Capital CFO, and I just want to tell you a little bit about our company. So we are a company that works in your business, so you can work on your business. And what we offer for our clients is outsourced bookkeepers and chief financial officers to help with your finance departments. We are not a staffing agency, but we can help with recruitment for your next hire. And we also offer consulting services for nonprofits and business philanthropy. So that's a little bit about us. As Liz stated this morning, we are going to be talking through creating a powerful board and building that driven and dynamic board that is also accountable. We will be sharing a lot of information. I'm going to be speaking as quickly as possible to get through this and get you guys in and out within the hour. If you do chat us any questions, just know that in case we cannot get to them, we will follow up with everybody via email, regardless of who sent us the question. So let's get started. I was the CEO and CFO of a local nonprofit here in the Capital Region. And when I first started with the agency, it was right around the first financial crisis that we had here. So 2008, 2009. And the way that it looked before is we were a board of about 23, 25 people, somewhere always in that range. Our nonprofit was anywhere between $800,000 and $1 million at any given point in time. I, as the CEO, was very green, very brand new. I spent a lot of my time really focused on our budget and realizing that we were extremely grant funded, specifically federally grant funded. And kind of seeing the writing on the wall, I spent a lot of time with our board flipping that narrative so that we became a lot more community funded and supported. The board, since I was so green and so new, really spent their time mentoring and coaching me and became what we called a working board. They spent a lot of time working with me on becoming a community supported agency, really figuring out our voice in the community, and the things that we wanted to work on and prioritize. Once we were, I would say 3 years into my role, I went to a national conference and heard about this powerful board model from an organization in Greater Miami. And that's one thing that I definitely want to talk about. The model that I'm going to be using is what I used for my agency and my board. I took it from Greater Miami and I customized it for my area. So you can certainly take the information that we're using and customize it for your agency and your area, and slowly step up to whatever target you're actually looking for. So Greater Miami, although Greater Miami and, very different region, their agency was extremely similar to mine. Similar in size, similar in budget, similar in board, similar in board work. But then when they implemented this, they really exploded. And within a few years, their agency was making so much money, was able to buy a building. So again, not something that I can necessarily do here, but I was able to customize it and step my way up. A little bit about the journey. So our situation was that our board give-get was not very specific at all. On average, our board attended one or so of our invitation events, and on average gave $1,500, but the majority of my board gave around $500. So you could definitely see that some people were giving at a much higher level, but the majority were giving around $500 or $100. Individual giving was at a minimal. It was one of the lowest of our board, of our budget line, and we really didn't have major gifts as a priority or coming through the doors. We definitely had some four-figure gifts, but very, very low level. Most of our board members were middle management, and this is their first board experience. So the first time they joined our board was their first time actually being on a board. And we had one event that raised around $70,000, and then we had a gala that raised about $50,000. So when I brought back this powerful board model, we set some goals and objectives. As an executive team on the board, we were really talking about bringing our agency from we felt was good to great. That was kind of the focus and the mission and what we really focused our efforts on. The board needed to re-examine and re-energize their roles. This process was about 3 to 4 years for us to make the full transition, and we'll talk through what those years looked like. We had to redefine the CEO role, and that role had to become much more board-centric. And here's the big one. There was a definite line that we drew in the sand, specifically in year one, when the board decided that this was the avenue that they were going to take. We drew a very definitive line in the sand and said, this is now the board role. This is what we as a board are going to focus on. We're all moving in this direction together. And we'll talk through some of the fallback from that as well. So this is the outcome. We had a very specific board get with an accountability scorecard that we shared with board members all of the time. Our board supported all of our invite events at an honorary committee level, and the reason that they did that was they heard from donors in the community that said, when I get an invitation to your event, the first thing I do is I look at your honorary committee and I look at your board list, and if those two don't match, I really struggle with supporting this event if your board isn't supporting it. So even if they weren't able to attend, they at least supported. Major gifts became included in our budget, and individual giving became our focus. We no longer trained people on how to be board members, so we really worked with experienced board members. We were able to launch a major giving campaign, and our gala that used to raise, between that $40,000 and $50,000, $50,000 at its highest, started to raise between $75,000 and $85,000 in a 3-year period. Some of the other feedback, our board was cut in half. That happened within year one, and I'll talk through exactly what that meant and what that looked like. Our board give and get increased from $83,000 with 23 people on our board to $125,000 with 11 members of our board. And again, this happened over a 3-year period. So you can see that with half the people, we were able to raise a lot more money and do it a lot more strategically. Board recruitment became very specific and very clear. The CEO, me at the time, increased my time spent with the board and really focused on board stewardship and development. Board members felt much more connected to the agency, the mission, the CEO and the staff, and all parts of our budget were impacted by our board members. They became our major donors and our leaders, specifically in philanthropy. So this is the how. The board decided to lead the way with this. So when I came back with this idea from the national conference, I spoke to members of our executive team on the board. I spoke to very specific members, and they decided when they really wanted to go in this direction, they led the way. So they decided together. There was a lot of talk, a lot of back and forth, a lot of compromise, a lot of trying to figure out what this was going to look like, what it would look like for the first 4 years, how we would build off of that. And they were the ones that announced it to the full board. We created a shared vision and a 3-year board strategic plan. They started to challenge each other and created some really healthy competition within the board. They helped to recruit new members, and our relationship with the board grew. Not only the board and CEO relationship, but the agency and board relationship. Board leadership took charge and got other board members excited about this. Strategic stewardship of our board members became my sole focus. So for those of you that joined our webinar on our stewardship grid, my board members became top on that stewardship grid. So monthly, they were getting something from me regarding how their impact directly related to our mission. But not only that, I called board members out every chance that I got. And we'll talk through a lot more of this, but at board meetings, I would call people out for exceptional work that they did that month, that week, that quarter. I would call board members out via email if they, had a great idea or hit something out of the park. You'll see that I started to meet with board members one-to-one, and I would really talk through what they were doing exceptionally well. We measured performance and made everybody accountable. So the board scorecard became our focus at board meetings, at executive committee meetings, and board accountability became center focused. And then they had financial oversight and a vision for the future for our agency. So now let's talk through the process and how this worked. The first thing we did was we made diversity a priority with our board. So this means for us, these were the 4 things that we really targeted and looked at. We were an agency that served 4 counties here in the Capital Region, and we wanted to make sure that all of the counties that we served were being represented on our board. We looked at the industries that were being represented. We were a board made up solely of bankers. And what do we need to do to change that? And what are the things we need to bring in? And then the 2 other things that we looked at is the racial profile of our board and the gender of our board members. Were we all white male? Were we bringing in voices from the communities that we served? Did we look like and start having that vision like the people that we represented and served on our board? I'm now going to turn it over to Liz because she's going to walk through a very specific template as to how this is done.
Thanks, Sabrina. So I guess I want to start with just kind of talking a little bit about what is diversity, what does that mean? And it takes various forms in the boardroom, but what it can really kind of be categorized generally into skills, experience, and expertise, background, ethnicity, cultural background, that kind of thing. And having a real good mix of skills and experience really ensures that the board isn't kind of thinking, you don't necessarily want a board where everyone usually agrees. It doesn't mean that you want dissension around the board table, but room for different ideas and different perspectives, because the more different perspectives that people bring to the table, the more opportunity and the more opportunity and the environment there is for creativity, innovation, and out-of-the-box thinking. So one really easy way to start is you want to figure out who you already have around the table and decide what do you need around the table in terms of skills and experiences. And it's going to be different for every agency. Sabrina mentioned that for her agency, the focus was, they were focusing on race, gender, the county representation, and industry. So here's a couple examples of what we call a gap analysis or a board matrix to help you get a handle on that. That's the first place to start. So here's two different examples. On the left column, you can see the different perspectives, expertise, and competencies that this particular agency would like, that they feel is the optimal mix. And then across the top, you're just going to have all your board members and tick the boxes. What columns do they, what rows do they fill? And you can see the example on the left-hand side of the categories that that board or that agency decided was important to them: Indigenous wisdom, women's leadership, youth leadership, etc. And then all the current board members across the top. And that gives you an example or an idea of where your gaps are. So on that board matrix example, for this agency, the things that they're missing on their board representation: spirituality and faith, high net worth, foundations, Latino. I just also want to mention that one of the best practices, and Sabrina mentioned this a little bit, one of the best practices that's emerging right now and has been talked about a while in the nonprofit sector is to have board representation that reflects the communities that your agency serves. For example, a homeless shelter should have board members who are currently or have experienced homelessness in the past. Domestic violence shelter should have optimally directors who've served, who have survived domestic violence or experience with that. So because you want to be reflective and have the perspectives of the people that you're serving. So this board matrix or board gap analysis is a really easy way to visualize who you already have around the table and who you might be missing. And this is the first step in board recruitment that's specific and clear. So you'll be getting a template for this. We'll give you that after the webinar. So that's a quick overview of gap analysis. Sabrina, do you have anything else to add?
No, that was great. Thank you, Liz. Really good summary.
Okay.
So the next thing that we focused on is we clarified our expectations from the beginning. We created a board agreement and commitment. All of our current board members signed onto it, and it became part of our orientation. And here's the big one. There was no compromising. So this is where, again, drawing that definitive line in the sand comes into place. We decided as an agency, this is going to be the board focus. This is going to be their job description. This is going to be how they're moving our agency forward. Does that mean that we were inflexible? Absolutely not. Does that mean that if something didn't work out and somebody was having an issue either personally or professionally, we wouldn't obviously take that into account? Absolutely. If somebody tried something and it just didn't work, we worked with them through that. So absolutely, we were flexible, but we were not willing to compromise on what our board agreement was for our agency. Then we created a very specific and targeted individualized plan for each board member, and we recommended that they work on 2 to 3 specific things for our agency. Liz is going to take you through what one looks like, but I just wanted to say a couple things about this. The reason that this became so important in our agency is when we first started having these conversations, I had 2 board members sitting around the table, and we were talking about how our board is just expected to do it all, which was kind of the direction we were going in as an agency, and it obviously wasn't working because the second you try and do everything gets watered down, nothing gets very specific, and nothing works. So I had a board member that was saying, please don't ask me to ask my friends to contribute to a $25 campaign. It's going to water down my message. My friends aren't going to want to do this. I'm not going to be successful at it. My friends love a gala. I can bring you 25 people, 30 people to a gala. They're going to want to come. They're going to want to get dressed up. They're going to want to come and celebrate you. They're going to want to spend money there. I can knock it out of the park for a gala. So please don't ask me to ask those same people to give you $25 for a campaign. Across the table, I had a gentleman that was saying the exact opposite. He was like, my friends do not want to go anywhere at night. They don't want to get babysitters. I'm not going to be able to even bring 5 people. I'm going to come. Even it's going to be a challenge for me, but I'm going to come. But oh my God, if I can open up a social media link and ask my friends to give 25 bucks, I will raise you $3,000 in 3 days. Please just let me do that. Don't force me to also have to bring people to this gala. And that was the first time that I realized what I was doing was setting up my board for failure. If I asked them to do everything and participate in everything, and that's where this individualized plan came into place. So I'm going to have Liz now go over the template for it.
Okay, we'll just give you a quick overview of this. So this really helps board members plan out and clarify what exactly are they committing to when they sign that give-get commitment form. And it doesn't leave anyone assuming what's going to happen. It lays out a clear roadmap for board members. They know what they're committing to, and it allows people to fundraise and friend raise in a way that best suits their style and comfort level, as Sabrina said. So here's just one example of how this can be done. And again, this is a template that you will get following the webinar. So this is the individual board annual plan. Here's the cover. You know, our agency that we've made up is the high impact agency, doing good things every day. And then some of the things that might be included in this individual plan are purpose, right? This welcomes the board member, lets them know what the purpose of this individual plan is. And then some other things that are in here. Again, we mentioned the purpose and all the opportunities that each board member has to contribute throughout the year, lays out everything, all the events and campaigns, and then it allows them to kind of plan their, or map out their plan of attack. So you can see this particular agency that we have as an example has all their events and campaigns for the year are here. They've got a high impact community 5K fun run, men who cook competition, a gala, etc. And then for each one of those, there's an individual page, and here on the right is the page for the fun run. And then the board member, if this is an event that they would like to do, maybe they're a runner and they've got friends who are runners, so this is really up their alley. They'll have places to put their individual fundraising goal, teams that they field, and then their plan of action at the bottom. So you're going to have a page for each one of the events that you have for the year, and the board member together either with the ED or perhaps the board chair can fill this out, and this holds them accountable for the year, and it helps keep the CEO organized in terms of stewarding that board member through the year and the events through the course of the year. So again, real quick run through of what that individual board plan might look like, and you will get an example of this at the end. Sabrina, did you have anything else you wanted to add while we're
The only thing I would add is, again, have your board members pick 2 or 3 as opposed to all of them, because again, those are the ones that get watered down and they're just going back to the same well, asking again and again. The other thing is, do not let a board member say, I've got it, I know what my give get is, I don't need a plan. Because if you don't have a plan, you're not going to be able to follow up with that board member, and you're not going to be able to reallocate as things are coming up. So really work this out with your board members, and we'll talk through when we actually did that. The next thing is we integrated our board members very early in the process. So right from the jump, as soon as somebody was a potential board member, no matter how they were picked to be a potential board member, we shared with them the board commitment, the vision, the time commitment, the give-get commitment, the scorecard, how we keep track of it, how our meetings are run, how our committees are run, what committees they can participate in. So we just transparency, honesty, always upfront, always just here's all the information, you make the decision. We also would pair them with board members to walk them through, like, here's how they got to their give-get. We talked about how I, as the CEO, really kept track of everything, and I would show them that. And then it was always in our orientation packets and always facilitated by myself and either the board chair or the VP. And Liz is going to walk you through kind of what our orientation looked like.
All right. Sabrina, once again. So I would argue that board orientation is really the first step in holding board members accountable. It really lays the solid groundwork for those powerful board that Sabrina's been telling you about throughout. So this is where expectations are reinforced and reiterated. And of course, if you're working this plan kind of step by step in a logical way, nothing about board roles and responsibilities that you go over in orientation is going to be news or new information to this new board member. As Sabrina said, expectations, the role of the board is made clear from the first moment you have an initial conversation about someone who might be interested in board service. So some of the major things that we feel are important for board orientation to cover, you want new board members to leave this orientation well informed about their role, generally well informed about how the organization operates, who's who are the other people on the board. So in your board binder or your orientation materials, it's a good idea to maybe have a little thumbnail portrait and a bio of the other board members, so this new folks can get an idea of who else is around the table. You want people to leave really, proud and able to share a few key accomplishments of the organization, because one of the major roles, and I would submit perhaps the major role of your board members, is to act as ambassadors in the community on behalf of your organization. They're going to bring in new friends, new supporters, and really act as ambassadors. And in order to do that effectively, they need to be able to tell your organization's story. You want board members to be ready to contribute on day one. Impressed that they've joined a professional organization. This is your chance to make your impression on the new board members as well. And you want them to leave feeling valued and appreciated. Here's a sample orientation table of contents here. You will probably, your orientation is going to look different. Not everyone's orientation or the format of orientation is going to be the same. Some organizations bring all their new board members on at once or get voted in at the annual meeting, for example, and that really lends itself well to a group orientation. You might have all the new board members in for a couple hours to do an orientation. Other agencies that are smaller, for example, my agency, we bring board members on kind of throughout the year, one at a time, 2 or 3 a year as we go. So we have individual orientations for those board members, just me and the board member and perhaps the board chair giving them information and going through the board binder. So your actual format for the orientation might look a little bit different depending on your agency and the size of your agency. But the content is really important, and we will provide you with kind of a checklist of some vital pieces for board orientation. So no matter the format of it, this is really your chance to sit down with those new board members, reiterate their roles, and really bring them on into the organization. Did I need anything else, Sabrina?
No, that was perfect.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so the next thing that we did was the board and CEO had monthly one-to-one meetings. This was our opportunity to go over the individualized plan with them. And since I was well aware of what their individualized plan was going to be, I really talked through, okay, this month you want to be focused on X. It also allowed us to reallocate if goals weren't being hit. You weren't able to make that one, but where do you want to reallocate your resources and your time for the next year? Again, the less surprises, the better, right? So that by the end of the year, everybody knew where they stood, what was happening, and what was happening with the plan. These one-to-one meetings were either via email, a phone call, sometimes they were in person, and I want you to think about that. So I had to now incorporate 11 to 15 additional monthly meetings into my calendar. We talked through how my role became very board-centric. This is part of it. So I would work with them on their individualized plans. Sometimes the chair would have to chime in. Sometimes a mentor would have to chime in to kind of help a board member along, because their success was our success. So of course we wanted them to succeed, and of course we wanted them to move through. And all of this was a shift. So it was a shift in my priorities. It was a shift in their priorities for board. And I would ask them at their end of the year meetings, how do you want your one-to-ones? Do you want a quick email from me? Do you want a phone call? Are we setting that up consistently? Do you want to meet? And I had board members that were all over the place. So there were some that were like, just tell me what to do every single month in an email. I had others that were like, I need to see you face to face. Let's have a cup of coffee and let's really work through this together. And then I had ones that were like, yeah, sure, let's set up a quick call. But again, it's a shift. It's a shift in what I prioritized and what they prioritized. And then we worked through the scorecard. We're going to go through with Liz a template of what a scorecard could look like. Again, remember, these were our priorities as an agency. You can do this in however way or priorities you choose. I will say this, I put mine in an Excel document. Excel sings to my soul. Many of you know this about me. It doesn't have to be in an Excel document. You can do it however you choose. The reason I used an Excel document is one, I could do formulas in it. Two, board members were ranked by how they were doing, which is what accounted for some of that healthy competition. Our top five were always kind of competing with each other to one up one another. I was able to put their individualized plans right in there as notes. I was also able to put in their give-get right in there as notes and keep very specific notes around what was happening with their scorecard. The scorecard was shared at every board meeting, every executive committee meeting, during our one-to-one meetings with every board member. If they were struggling, we would bring in a mentor to help them or the board chair to help them to kind of get them right back on track. It also allowed us to tell them if there was something happening. Again, that flexibility. Is there something going on that is not allowing you to participate with us this year, of which we completely understand. It didn't mean we compromised on what our vision was and what the board role was, but we were human and we were able to say, you know, there's stuff that's popping up and we get it. So Liz is going to walk us through what a shared scorecard could look like.
Okay, so this is a very wide document, so I'm giving it to you in two pieces. I wasn't able to fit it all on a slide in a size that would have been readable. So here's the scorecard, and here's board members are here in this first column here, and this is where, as Sabrina said, your top performers, so to speak, is number one, and then they're ranked in a row here, and this is where you get that healthy competition between board members. And I do want to reiterate again that this process was board driven. This isn't the executive director ranking board members without and just presenting it without board member buy-in. So this is something that the whole group as a board has bought into, and it's presented in that manner as so that healthy competition is something that may take a while to work through. Again, it's not something that's been imposed on the board. This is something that they are leading with and have agreed to as a group. And then across the top of the scorecard here are all the different categories that go into the board over the course of the year. Here's the meeting attendance. So you've got committees, your board meeting, executive committee, and then total absences. Committee involvement, and these just list the different committees that each board member is involved in. Obviously, I've just got 2 sample board members up here. You wouldn't have all these empty slots. And then event attendance is the next section. And so this is where you put all your events over the course of the year. And here they are. So we've got individual donations, event donations, and this is the give-get part. Individual donations, event fundraising, et cetera, et cetera. So this is quite literally a scorecard on how board members are doing in terms of fund development and fund engagement. Again, Sabrina mentioned everything goes on here, or I think she mentioned this before. Maybe this is because we've done practice with this webinar before. I'll let her talk about that. But everything that comes into the agency that is in any way connected to that particular board member, whether it's outreach, bringing people to events, or selling tickets directly, goes on this scorecard. And then there's all these different categories. And again, you will customize this to your agency. And here, this teal column here is what is in the individual board member plan for the year. That was their goal for the year, so that's where that goes. And then I really like these last 2 boxes too: board members recruited, and committee members recruited. So that goes on there as well. So this is the scorecard that Sabrina's talking with each individual board member about when she meets with them individually. And it helps people really stay on track over the course of the year, and also allows them to adjust if perhaps they don't hit certain goals for a given event, early on, and then that can be adjusted. And again, you will get this template along with all the other tools and templates that we've talked about. I want to just make sure you all know that you will be getting these templates after the webinar. All right, Sabrina, here you go.
So before we turn off of this screen, I just want to mention, if you see all the little red marks in there, those are the notes that I would put in. So under the IP goal, that was their individual plan goal. So that's the dollar figure that they were going to raise for the agency that year, but inside each of single one of those is a note saying exactly how they're going to do it. So what they were targeting, what they were focusing their time and attention on. And then same with the little red dots all over that you see, that's how they brought in that money. And the one thing I did just to keep myself organized is I wouldn't count it on the scorecard unless it was actually received by the agency. I didn't want to confuse a board member and have him or her think, oh wait, did I already pay for that? Or did that person already come through? Because this, to me, I was like, I'm not going to be able to keep track of it that way. So once it came in, it went on the scorecard, and I made that very clear to our board members. There is a question in the chat box about how often we met as a board, and we're going to talk about that next very soon. So hold that thought, we're coming. Okay, so we talked through aligning the board on a strategy. So this was our next thought in the process. So we shifted the board from what we called the working board to a strong fundraising board, and we really raised the game on our fundraising. That's what we focused on. That's how we define a powerful board. Again, you can change that focus, but that was our focus, and that's how we developed our individualized plans, our scorecards, and our meetings. We created an atmosphere of openness, trust, fun, and competition. Our board members wanted to be together. They liked being together. They liked coming to board meetings. They liked joking with each other and this healthy competition that they had with one another. They really enjoyed it. They had fun with it. And not only that, but they knew that we were always honest and open, and here's how everybody's doing, and here's who can help who. So it just helped so much in bringing that board together for a single focus. We reduced our committee and board meeting times. So let's talk about that. Our board met 6 times a year. They met every other month, and we significantly reduced the amount of time that they were meeting. They met for 1, maybe 1.5 hours. 1.5 hours was a really heavy agenda. So that was the max for every month. Our midi meetings, we shifted to phone meetings. Now that Zoom is a thing, I would absolutely do them on Zoom so you can still see one another. They were 30 minutes. They were strategic, they were focused. Our committees consisted of board members and community members. Our community members also had individualized plans and also had a give-get. So if a board member recruited, that give-get was significantly lower than the board give-get, by the way. But if a board member recruited a committee member, that committee member's give-get went on the board scorecard. So when I say that we counted everything, we counted everything. We used a consent agenda for all of our board meetings. So things like meeting notes, the CEO report, committee meeting notes, all of that went on the consent agenda. All of our board information was sent to our board a week before the board meeting. It was their responsibility to read through it. If there was anything on the consent agenda that they wanted to move up for discussion, they would move it up for discussion. They would just let me know or the board chair know. Board recognition became a must. I think we've talked about this 3 times. We're going to talk about it 3 more. I would call out my leaders, my donors. They were my leaders. They were my philanthropists. They were my donors. They were my agency's voice. I called them out every chance that I got. So at a board meeting, I would call out a board member, and I made sure that it wasn't always those top 5 that were, trying to compete with one another to get there. If there was a board member that knocked it out of the park, I would talk about it. I would talk about how they did it. I gave people ideas. The other thing that we did as a board is at the beginning of every board meeting, we did a train the trainer. It was a 10-minute training of the board on any given topic. And one of the topics once a year was recognizing 2 board members on how they got to their give-get the year prior. And I always made sure that I picked 2 people that did it very differently. So you got 2 very different perspectives. Whenever I was recruiting a board member, I would talk through, here's some of the ways that people got to their give-get. So gave people ideas of how they would get there. And here's the big thing. You cannot ask board members who are in very high positions to spend all of this time focused on their individualized plan, the give-get for your agency, being an advocate, and ask them to attend committee meetings that last 2 hours every single month and board meetings that last 3 hours every single month. Something has to give. Something has to give. These people are busy. People from diverse backgrounds are busy. They are being pulled in every single direction. Their voice matters and they want what they're saying to be important and impactful. And as Liz said, you don't want everybody agreeing. So you want these meetings to be impactful, strategic, have an agenda focus, and you want them to come together and start hearing each other. You can't ask them to do that and contribute 7 hours a month to your agency. They're volunteers. So we picked, and this is how we picked. You don't have to pick in that direction, but we picked and said, our committee meetings are going to be 30 minutes. They're going to be very strategic. Here's the agenda. Agenda went out a week before. Our board meetings are going to be 1 hour. Here's the agenda, very specific, very targeted. And here's another big one. Share your mission, share your reason. Your reason should be their reason. Remember that they're here to hear how they're making a difference, how you're making a difference. It's great if you talk about, we just got $100,000. Now tell me what you're going to do with it. Tell me how you're going to go out and impact that community. Tell me why that matters to you. Because my $5,000, my $500, my $50, I want it to go somewhere that feels impactful. Tell me that reason. Remind me why we're here. So not only did we constantly review their performance, we also asked them to review their performance. So Liz is going to talk through a board self-assessment now.
Thanks, Sabrina. So this board self-assessment is a companion to the individual board scorecards and the individual board annual plans. This is really an assessment that individual board members do on the board as a whole. How is the board functioning as a group? Board members are responsible for following through on their own individual responsibilities, but they're also responsible as a group to function as a strong governing body for the organization, right? Board members who work individually on their own duties, but it's equally important for them to function well as a whole. And I think anyone who has ever worked with a dysfunctional board of directors knows this painfully well, that if the board is not functioning well as a group and fulfilling their duty as a group, then it can really be a drag on your organization, and it impedes your ability to impact, to make the social impact that that is the purpose for your agency, that is your mission. So, and the board's also really accountable to the people that you serve, and they are accountable to affect real change and social impact. That's the reason that you're here, is to impact your communities and make a real change socially. So the way that board members interact with one another has a real impact on their effectiveness as a group. And so we recommend, or it's best practices to do a board self-assessment at least annually. Many boards do it more frequently than that, every 6 months or at the end of the year, and then again, maybe at the beginning of the year. It's a good thing to do. Your annual meeting might be a good place to do it. If you have a board retreat, that's another good place to do it. But a board self-assessment is a real good way to evaluate how board members feel about the job that they're doing, and how it can highlight areas that you might need to strengthen, that the board might need to strengthen. And it also, it's a really good way to start the discussion about areas for improvement, and to help the board move toward higher functioning and more effectiveness. So here's two examples of board self-evaluations. The one on the left, and these are filled out individually by board members, and then you'll collate the information to get an overall picture of the board. But this one on the left, you can see these kind of benchmarks on the left, and then the person filling it out is asked to assess whether all board members fulfill this, most, half, or few. And then the difference on the one on the right is that the benchmarks are on the left, and then the person filling out the assessment is asked to rank it, give it a score on a scale of 1 to 5 for high. So again, you'll get both of these examples, and you should tailor it, or you can use it. You can use them as they are, obviously, or can tailor it to your agency. But this is a good way, as I said, to get the discussion started and to help get a snapshot of how the board feels it's doing its job as a group. So it's really a companion to those individual scorecards and plans, and its assessment of the board as a whole. So again, you will get those.
Great job, Liz.
Okay.
Okay, so we did annual board reviews of all of our members at the end of the year. The CEO, board chair, and sometimes VP would sit in. We would talk through our board scorecard for the year. Again, no surprises because they've been hearing from me monthly. And then we would talk through what they wanted to do for the next year. We would build their individualized plan. And it allowed them to tell us what they wanted to work on, but what was working, not working within the agency. A direction they might have wanted to go in, a new committee they wanted to start, an idea they wanted to bring forth. This was their opportunity to also tell us, like, here's what's working for me, here's what's not working for me, here's what needs some improvement, and have us figure out what their passions are. We planned annual retreats so our board members could have fun together. We talked about this, fewer committees and more strategic and focused monthly committees. And now this might be the fourth time. We recognized and called out our board members, the ones that did well that week, that month, quarter, year, didn't matter. Call them out, call them out, call them out. Make them realize what their impact means for your agency. Okay, so here's now the new CEO role, and I'm going to talk through this quickly so we do have some times for questions. As you can see, the CEO role spent the majority, about 40% of my time on stewardship and board development and individualized plans and keeping track of board members. I oversaw the entire scorecard and updated and maintained that information, so everything that board member did went on that scorecard. If there was anything I missed, again, those notes were right in the cells, so the board member could go in and say, okay, that's what she counted, that's what she counted. She might have missed this, and it was an opportunity for us to have a dialogue and a conversation. The CEO and the board had a long-term vision of where the agency would be in 3 years and 5 years, and then we had another, here's the next thing that we're going to be working on together as an agency. The CEO needed to be very open and learned a new way of doing business. This was very different for all of us. This was a real shift in the agency, the work, the board role, my role. The CEO developed, and with the board, we managed as a team. The agency leadership, we created really strong partnerships with the board and the agency staff because, again, depending on what they were working on, I would team them up with an agency staff to say, oh, you're on that campaign, here's who's working on that campaign. They would start working together, and those relationships flourished as well, which allowed them to feel even more connected to the agency. The CEO was responsible for keeping the mission at the front of all of our work. Staff meetings, board meetings, committee meetings, it didn't matter. The mission was what we focused on. The board and the CEO needed to pivot, and we needed to adapt. That, again, didn't mean that we compromised on what we were focused on, but if something wasn't working, we need to figure out the bottleneck and shift. And we constantly needed to be evaluating ourselves. I also want to remind everybody that the board's role is to evaluate the CEO, right? They are my bosses. They evaluated how I managed, how I ran the agency. So holding them accountable gets tricky because you're holding your bosses accountable, which is why it is so important that this has to be board run. And you need to be sitting in there with your board chair and or your VP, and the accountability part needs to come from them. You might be the one that is maintaining and monitoring and keeping track of stuff, but the accountability piece needs to come from the board as a whole. So some lessons learned. This is not an easy lift, and you really need to be ready, and your board really needs to be ready. It took 4 years to implement this plan, and here's what I'm going to talk through. In year one, when it was discussed at the board, we lost half of our board members. Half of them were like, this isn't for me. This isn't what I signed on to do. We understood, we respected, we love them. These are your friends. These are your supporters. These are people that might have been with you for 30, 35 years, longer than you've been there. We love you. We want you to continue to be our friend, our supporter, join a committee. Whatever we need to do, stay a part of us. We get it. So half of them backed away. If I did not know that going in, I 100% would have said, we've made a terrible mistake. I'm regretting all of my life decisions. I am so sorry. I'm taking you all back. But I knew that. I knew that because of the agency in Greater Miami that told me that. So I told my board that when we were setting this course, I said, I want you to be very well aware we're going to lose half of our board members. I can't tell you which ones, but I'm going to tell you we're going to lose them. So knowing that made me feel confident that we can continue to do this. In year 2, we lost even more members, people that tried and just couldn't hit their give-get and were like, I'm sorry, you don't have the time to put into this. This isn't how I want to be spending my resources and time. We knew that was coming, so we were able to keep going. By year 3 is when we had our team and when we knew and everybody was ready to take this on, knew how they were going to get there, knew what worked for them. And year 4 is when we started to build. So year 4 is when we really worked on recruitment and how we were going to bring people in and how we were just going to build off of the already stuff in motion. So I will end with this. It takes courage to act and stay the course. There will be members, of course, that will say, I just want to go back to the way it was, because people really struggle with change. And this is their passion and this is what they love. So it's hard. It takes a team. You cannot do it alone. You're going to need board members that want to do this with you and want to take this on with you, because it is a heavy lift. It is also heavy for CEO and leaders. This is a big change in how you do business, and you have to be ready for it. And you have to be ready to have all of the information and the templates, and here's how we're going to do it. And you have to have a common voice, because if you don't stay the course, if it's not the same message from you and the board leadership and the board, if people are starting to just talk within themselves and say, this isn't the direction we want to move in, it's not going to work. It has to be same voice carried through with that compromise. So with that, we will take questions. We've been answering them a little bit in the chat box, but if you do additional information, please let us know. We'll be happy to answer questions either now for the next 5 or 6 minutes that we have together, or via email as well. As Liz said, on the next screen, here are all the templates that we will share with you. So Liz, if you want to summarize those real quick.
All right. So here are some of the things that you'll be getting. So the 2 examples of board self-assessments. We've got a couple examples of this gap analysis or the board matrix, so you can figure out who you've got around the table and who you need, so your recruitment can be targeted. We've got an example of the individual board annual plan, and then that amazing scorecard that Sabrina put together. We'll give you a blank one of those that you can adapt and use as you see fit. And then also, it's not pictured on here, but we'll also send you a kind of a checklist of what things that you might want to have in your orientation for your new board members. And then we will also be sending out a recording of this webinar. So you'll have a whole lot of tools to look at and to kind of wrap your mind around this whole process and see if it might be something that would be helpful for your agency. And then, of course, we also offer other services for nonprofits as well. Here's just a little overview. So for you folks that are in the nonprofit sector, we're always happy to have a consult with you if there's something that you're grappling with, or an issue, or something that you would like a thought partner for. Here's some of the things that we are able to do in our nonprofit consulting segment. And then here's our website down here. All this stuff is there as well. And then here's our contact information. Always happy to speak with you or to answer any questions.
I just want to close by saying we are going to be sending out an evaluation. So we really want to hear from you if there's more that you want to know about this topic, either other topics and diving more into board development. We will be doing a webinar on board recruitment and how you recruit board members once you kind of have this in place, and successful and unsuccessful strategies that I certainly used, and others of you might have used as well. And we can always do one-to-one board development work if anybody's interested in that. We can certainly work through this with your board members as well if anybody's interested in having that conversation. If you do have questions that you don't want to put in the chat box, I understand this is a very sensitive topic because, again, these board members are your leaders and they evaluate you. Please reach out to us via email. We're happy to answer any questions. We're happy to keep it very confidential. So, please reach out to us with any questions you might have.
There is a question, Sabrina, since we've got a few more minutes. We've got about 7 minutes until the top of the hour. So here's a question from Heather. She says, when you reduced the number of board members, how did you start that conversation to remove those that were not performing?
Yeah, so like I said, when we first set off on this, half just went by themselves. They just realized. The second wave were people that realized, I can't do it. And then by the third wave, so by that third year, end of year conversations, it just became really apparent. And again, transparency, honesty, we let board members know we're going to be doing this in phases and in stages. So year one, this is our focus. This is what we're doing. We're going to give this a try. We're going to figure it out with you. What works for you, what doesn't work for you. Year two, we'll try a different strategy if what worked, what didn't work for you in year one. By year three, if you are still struggling, that's saying something. So this isn't the right place. It's not the right time. This committee worked better, but they knew it was coming. They knew this conversation was coming at the end of the year and they brought it up. They were like, you know what? I've tried this, this, and this. None of them seem to work for me. Maybe I'm not targeting the right network. Let me try committee work. But always keep those people close to your heart because they loved you. They loved your mission. They loved the work that you were doing. So making them feel respected and honored for what they tried to do, and then finding a place for them, finding another place for them. It's hard. It's really hard. But if you start early, it gets easier.
Well, I guess that's it. No other questions right now. And again, everybody will be sending out a recording of this webinar. Thank you so much for being here. And we'll also send out that evaluation and hope to see you at our next webinar. We'll send out information about that as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.